Look, when you're stressed out, it doesn't matter if you've got hormone imbalances. It doesn't matter if you're stuck in traffic running late for an appointment or you're sick with the flu. You're having a stress response in your body. And that is the same exact thing as you eating donuts and cookies all day long.
I see a lot of this HPA axis dysfunction, or people aren't producing enough cortisol in the morning, or it's spiking super, super high because they're having caffeine on an empty stomach. What is that flow during the day supposed to look like?
Your cortisol is like your main checking account, and you're kind of pulling from that all the time, anytime you have a stressor, right? And this is from the minute you're born. And so over the course of years, your checking account is bound to run out. So then you start pulling from DHEA, which I like to call our savings account. And then DHEA can also make cortisol, but DHEA also makes our sex hormones, right? And leads into that pathway. So there's so many things that can be impacted that if you're constantly pressing that cortisol button, your curve will start to change where you can start to have.
Hello and welcome back to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Emmie here with Melissa Gentile. Today, we're happy to welcome Jessica Bruno. Jessica is a functional medicine nutritionist who has worked in the field of integrative and functional medicine for the past 7 years alongside practitioners who specialize in chronic disease states such as gut health, metabolic disorders, autoimmune, food sensitivities, mold toxicity, and more. As someone who struggled with her own chronic inflammatory diseases and autoimmunity, she gained a passion to help others discover the world of nutrition and lifestyle, and how if we look at a whole person and treat from the root cause, not just the symptom, it is possible to heal and gain your life back. And today we'll talk about how stress impacts us, a root cause many of us are familiar with. We're so excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for being here, Jessica.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. So we know that your health journey inspired where you are now. And I'm curious, what are a few things, if you could put a name to a few specific things that were game changing for you to obtain and sustain wellness?
I think as much as I want to say nutrition because I'm a nutritionist, I truly feel like the lifestyle perspective was almost a bit more life-changing for me, right? Because I went through my health journey started and from start to finish as far as getting really, really sick and then really hitting a place where I felt like I was getting back to normal was a little over a year, maybe a year and a half. And the last couple months, the biggest piece for me was stress. I was like, why am I still having irregular bowel movements? Why am I still having abdominal pain? And like things were a lot better. But there was this toxicity in my life that was causing a lot of stress. And so it wasn't until I changed that and really honed in on like what was creating, this toxic movement in my life that all of a sudden I was like, wow, 2 to 3 months later, I was like pretty much 100% better. So I think the lifestyle does play such a pivotal piece. And that's not to say that nutrition doesn't, but we can do so much with nutrition. And then it really comes down to like, how are your stress levels? How are you sleeping? Are you getting daily movement and all these things? Those are the hard things to stay true and committed to.
And Jessica, you had rejected immunosuppressant medications. So what was that process like? Did you have knowledge of functional nutrition and autoimmunity, or was this like totally new territory that you were discovering?
Well, that's a good question. So when I first started my journey in functional medicine, I actually was a front desk assistant at a functional medicine clinic. And my intent was to go to nursing school. And when I started working there, that's when I got sick. And my doctor who I worked for was the one that kind of helped guide me. And so when I first went to a gastroenterologist, they actually told me to go on immunosuppressants before they even knew what was wrong with me. They said, well, your colonoscopy looks fine.
Wow.
We don't see anything there, but your symptoms match Crohn's disease. And so they said, well, why don't we just try them because your symptoms are so bad, even though we don't see anything wrong inside your intestinal lining and your wall. And to me, I was like, why would I put myself on something where they told me if I then come off of it, it's harder to go back on, and not knowing what's going on with my system. So it just didn't make sense to me why someone would tell me to take a medication and not really know like if that's really what's happening. And so in that time, because I had already been working at the functional medicine clinic, I had also seen a lot of people that were truly, truly ill with like, mold and Lyme and these really chronic illnesses, and seeing them manage from a nutrition and lifestyle standpoint. I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it. And so At that time, when I did have that sickness journey, it was new to me, but I felt like I had a really strong support system that opened my eyes to other opportunities.
And what about this connection between blood sugar and stress? So, it sounds like you had a lot of stress. Addressing it was the key to getting better, using lifestyle as a way to maybe have a sense of routine, address that stress. But how did you become interested in that connection between blood sugar and stress?
So that came later on, more like my face to face with clients. So, more often than not, when we run blood work, and it doesn't matter if someone's coming to me for weight gain or they have daily fatigue or whatever the case is, to some degree, there tends to be always some blood sugar dysregulation. And you may not see it in the A1C. A lot of times they go, oh, no, I got my A1C checked. There's nothing wrong there. Well, you can present with insulin resistance before you see an A1C shift. And so a lot of doctors conventionally will not look at insulin, they just look at the A1C. So that I was seeing more and more and more. And then I think for patients and clients, the key is really making sure that you put it in a way that they understand. If you tell them that, oh, your stress is causing you to have these blood sugar dysregulation, if you're not familiar with the science behind it, you don't understand it. And so I started trying to figure out a way to talk to people about this. And I basically broke it down and I said, look, you know, here's all the different, like your body's a balancing beam, right? You've got supply on one end, demand on another. And when you have too much demand, that's when symptoms and different things arise. And so when we looked at the supply and demands, we looked at nutrition, we looked at stress, sleep, exercise, and movement, and your detox capabilities. And stress was always one of the biggest categories that people, I mean, we just live in a world where there's daily stress, and it's not just mental, emotional, but it's also the food we eat. It's at a cellular level, right? All the things that impact us. And so I tell people, I'm like, look, when you're stressed out, it doesn't matter if you've got hormone imbalances. It doesn't matter if you're stuck in traffic running late for an appointment or you're sick with the flu. You're having a stress response in your body. And that is the same exact thing as you eating donuts and cookies all day long. It may not be the same mechanism of action, but it is, in a sense, the same response. And so people would be like, oh, I don't eat carbs, I don't eat sugar, I don't do all these things, yet they're not managing their stress at all. And so when I made that connection and brought it back to like, if you were eating, this is what you're doing to your body by not addressing your stress, people have like this aha moment. And then they start to understand why they have to focus on that more. And so because I saw this so frequently in a clinical setting, it just became such a passion of mine because people don't connect those pieces.
So that kind of strikes a question to me here. So when you're first working with a client and you're noticing that they're saying things like, I don't eat much sugar, I don't eat much carbs, my blood sugar shouldn't be spiking, but let's say they are super stressed out all day long. How are you screening them to kind of show them, like, look at what your blood sugar is doing? Like, are you testing like fasting insulin, fasting blood sugar? Are you having them wear a CGM? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, both actually. So I'm typically always doing baseline blood work. So we're getting an idea if there's even, I mean, most of the time I'll help people with blood sugar no matter what, even if their A1C is fine and their insulin is fine. It's a good lifestyle habit to have. But I always run baseline blood work. And then if we do see things or they even present with symptoms that might seem like they're having blood sugar dysregulation, then typically I do like glucose monitors because, again, people like to see data. They like to see numbers and they like to see what their body's doing, right? Like everyone wants to know, like, what is my body doing? And there's those keystone tools you can give people, right, for blood sugar. And I'm sure, Melissa, as a nutritionist, it's like, okay, pair with healthy proteins and fats and don't go too long in between meals. Those are all keystone things, but everybody is unique, right? When I wore a glucose monitor, I can't tolerate brown rice. So I do have white rice on occasion. It's a refined starch. And even if I have a fourth of a cup and I pile on proteins and I pile on healthy fats, my blood sugar was through the roof. And so I think it's really giving those people that information, but also being able to see like what their body is doing in real time and then being able to help them adjust in that sense.
And you said, Jessica, with brown rice, you respond with a higher glucose.
Oh, no. With brown rice, I can't tolerate brown rice. No, my stomach, because of my GI issues, I
Brown?
can't eat brown rice. I don't digest it very well. So I end up having to have white rice.
Yeah.
So, but even if I have, I mean, I trialed
Hmm.
it with half a cup versus a fourth of a cup and like tons of proteins and healthy fats, and I still would have a spike. And so, and the other thing with glucose
Interesting.
monitors is that I tell people you can learn so much more than just nutrition, right? Because it is going to measure a glucose response. And this ties back into stress. So if people are exercising, if they are stressed out at work, if they have a food sensitivity, I've had people go, I didn't eat anything starchy and my glucose went through the roof or something. And it's like, well, what was in that meal? Maybe your body's having a stress response because you're sensitive to that food. So again, I like going back to that because it can identify not just food related, but other stressors that can be contributing to a glucose spike.
Right. It's mental, emotional, and physical stressors. It's
Yeah.
all going to be impacting us. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great
And,
point.
kind of staying on the topic of stress hormones here. So when we think about our stress hormones like cortisol, how are these hormones supposed to kind of fluctuate throughout the day? Because I see a lot of this like HPA axis dysfunction, or people aren't producing enough cortisol in the morning, or it's spiking super super high because they're having caffeine on an empty stomach. Like what is that flow during the day supposed to look like? And what are some things that we're doing that are just like destroying this?
Yeah. That's a great question. So there's a lot that can impact your kind of diurnal curve for cortisol. I mean, essentially what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to get this cortisol awakening response within the first 30 minutes, right? You create this bell shape and then it trails down throughout the day. So ideally, you're getting that spike and then it's coming down so we can sleep at night, right? We want our cortisol to come down, our melatonin to go up. But what happens is, I like to describe it, your adrenals produce cortisol and they produce DHEA, right? Those are the two main um, things coming from the adrenal gland. Well, when you're constantly stressed, and again, the thing that people don't understand is it's not just mental, emotional stress. I have people come to me that say, I'm a calm person. I feel like I handle stress pretty well. I don't feel stressed out in my life. But then they tell me they have high blood pressure. Maybe they have Hashimoto's and high, family history of high cholesterol or gut issues, whatever the case is. And I say, well, those are all stressors on your system to some extent, right? When you have imbalances and if they're not well regulated, that's the stress response in your body. That's inflammation. And so basically, what we're looking at is that your cortisol is like your main checking account, and you're kind of pulling from that all the time, anytime you have a stressor, right? And this is from the minute you're born. And so over the course of years, your checking account is bound to run out. So then you start pulling from DHEA, which I like to call our savings account. And then DHEA can also make
Mhm.
cortisol, but DHEA also makes our sex hormones, right? And leads into that pathway. So there's so many things that can be impacted that if you're constantly pressing that cortisol button, your curve will start to change where you can start to have either flat lines or becomes inverted, right? Where it's actually lower during the day and then high at night. So people end up having trouble sleeping or they wake frequently. And then that becomes an issue again, leading back to blood sugar, because when you have higher cortisol, you're going to have more glucose in your bloodstream. So it's so hard to say like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? When you're looking at these types of patterns, but that's why you do have to approach the whole body because they're so interconnected with how these things work against each other or with each other.
And what about intermittent fasting and blood sugar? We're constantly talking about intermittent fasting because it has stuck around for quite some time. It's still popular.
Yeah.
Who's a good candidate? Do you ever recommend it? What are your thoughts?
I love intermittent fasting. I think that there's huge benefits with it. I do think you have to be careful with who you're recommending it to. Specifically, people that might tend to
Hmm.
be more hypoglycemic, right? If people tend to have lower blood sugar, I might not push that too far. But I do think that intermittent fasting at a cellular level has a lot of benefits. For your blood sugar. And it might be a little bit more indirectly, right? Because when we're thinking of how stress can impact your blood sugar, we're thinking of what those stressors could be, right? And when you're looking at intermittent fasting, there's certain things happening at a cellular level at each hour that's passing, right? So let's say at 17 hours, people are reaching autophagy, right? So we're having cellular recycling. So if you have bad damaged cells and all these things that are creating inflammation, a stress response, and spiking blood sugar, that's helping with that. At 24 hours, you start to, develop new stem cells in your gut. Okay. If someone has poor gut health, that's a stress response. We require a lot of microbial diversity and things there to also stabilize our blood sugar. It's helping with that. So there's a lot of things that can benefit from interfasting at a kind of indirect way. And again, this is why you really have to educate the patient or the client to understand what's happening. But I do think there is that small group you also have to be careful with, just because if they do tend to have lower blood sugar, if you're going too long in time frames without food, that can actually create a bigger issue.
What about skipping meals on a regular basis? Do you see that ever lead to the opposite, wherein I think you mentioned it prior, you may see higher insulin, higher blood sugars?
Yeah, I try to explain to people that once they break their fast, meaning once you have your first meal of the day, you really shouldn't be going more than 4 hours in between a meal. And you're always individualizing this to somebody, because if someone does have GI issues, yeah, you really want to push that brink of 4 hours to let their gut have a break. But beyond that, I don't like to see people start eating and then, if someone has breakfast and then they're not eating again till dinner, ideally that's not going to look good for blood sugar, right? You want to have those consistency patterns. And I tell people all the time, because I do have clients that will say, well, Jessica, I can't eat this much. You want me to eat and I'm not used to eating like this. It doesn't have to be a large amount of food, right? I tell people, some people get what we call nocturnal hypoglycemia, where they tend to have their blood sugar dip in the night, and that can cause more sleep disruptions and things like that. And so I'll tell people, we'll do a bedtime snack, right? Like an hour before bed, have a healthy protein or a healthy fat. But I tell them it doesn't need to be big. It could be 3 to 4 almonds. It could be a scoop of almond butter off of a spoon. I like green olives, so sometimes I'll have 2 to 4 green olives before bed. So it's not necessarily how much you're eating. It's just making sure that you're keeping that consistency. So your body has that rhythm, right? Our body works off rhythm and patterns and thrives off that.
Sure. Yeah. I've definitely felt that myself.
Yeah.
And I have to get your opinion on caffeine as well, especially doing caffeine first thing in the morning. If it's on an empty stomach, how might caffeine affect our sleep? How does that interplay with blood sugar and affect cravings and just those fluctuations throughout the day?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people probably won't like me saying this, but you really shouldn't be having caffeine on an empty stomach. And I don't know if you guys follow Dr. Mindy Peltz. I highly regard her information she puts out there. But, even for people that think that coffee doesn't break a fast, everybody's bodies are different. So everybody thinks oh, if I have coffee, I'm going through this fasting phase and I'm doing okay. But it's a stimulant, and it can actually break the fast for some people, depending on your body, right? And so it's not always beneficial. But as it is a stimulant, I guess it kind of depends, right? I mean, there's pros and cons to any type of therapeutic approach out there. It's just trying to see if it's going to benefit somebody. If someone has low cortisol, maybe we want a little bit of a stimulant in the morning to kind of spike things up a little bit. But for the most part, I would say I traditionally will tell people not to have coffee on an empty stomach. And even if they think that it's something good that's healthy for fasting, I even tell them to buy the blood finger pricks, like CVS or Rite Aid, and track their blood sugar that way after they have their coffee, just to see. Because if they're getting a rise, then they can actually know in real time.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, I thought of one other thing when you brought up Dr. Mindy Pelz. I love her content as well. But I know she talks a lot about doing electrolytes during the fasting window. And I know a lot of people love Element or some of those other brands out there that might have some natural flavoring and then a natural 0-calorie sweetener. And a lot of people think it's a no calorie sweetener. There's no calories in my electrolyte drink. But what I've noticed about myself, and I really like to get your opinion, is can those still trigger an insulin response because you're tasting the sweetness? How do artificial sweeteners, even if they're non-caloric, trigger blood sugar irregularities?
That's a great question, actually. I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know if a artificial sweetener could technically. I'd have to look into that more. I mean, I'm not a fan of those anyways. So typically if I'm having people do an electrolyte, I really try to opt for things that don't have those. but I'm not quite sure on that. I'm sorry.
And I don't think really
Yeah.
anyone has a clear answer. I think that
Hmm.
there's some scientific uncertainty, and even the natural non-caloric sweeteners like
Mhm.
our stevia and our xylitol and our erythritol. I mean, if we're tasting sweet, right, the brain senses sweet, and therefore are we increasing insulin? I don't know. You know,
Mm.
they claim
Yeah.
no, but
I
they're also the
yeah,
ones selling it.
it's so hard to know because it's like, yeah, like I mean what you're saying is they claim no, but I've always had like if I have some stevia or like monk fruit or something,
Mhm.
I get hypoglycemia symptoms shortly after, like 2 hours after, and I'm like, I think this has an effect, but I've never worn a CGM, so just wanted to see if you notice any patterns in clients or
You
if you had
basically
any
will see the
insight.
spike before you're feeling that dip, because that's what it
Mm,
sounds like, is that maybe there's a spike and then a crash.
that could be it
No,
too.
that is
Yeah.
that's an interesting question though. Yeah, I'm going to try to see that with certain clients because I do know like Dr. Mindy Peltz talks about the beam minerals, and so I do use those a lot with clients because there's no artificial
Hmm.
anything in there, and they also don't have any flavor. So it's easy for people to just take. And then,
Okay.
when you are fasting, you do need, like I've experienced it time and time. If I do like a 24-hour fast, for example, I can tell I get like a little like dizzy, or I have spells where I'm just kind of like, ooh, I need a minute. And so I sometimes will get like an extra electrolyte boost or something like that. And then with the beam minerals, they also have their micro boost, which can help with detox. So that's also helpful because when you're fasting, you also want to kind of promote, detoxification as well.
What about key nutrients? We're talking about minerals, but maybe other key nutrients, foods that play a significant role in managing stress. So not just so much the blood sugar side of things, but in terms of managing stress, B vitamins. What about adaptogens? Kind of what's in your toolbox for managing stress?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think when it comes to nutrition, for me, I don't necessarily choose like individual foods. It's more of like creating a well balanced nutritional approach. And I would say from a stress perspective, it's more on the lifestyle. Like nutrition, you can cause stressors by like skipping meals, having too many processed foods or refined sugars, things like that. So we're always trying to go in to a really full, well balanced approach, like making sure you're getting enough protein, making sure you're getting enough healthy fats, and addressing what their other imbalances are. And then I focus a stronger output, I think, on lifestyle when it comes to stress, vagal toning type exercises. And I tell people, all these things will impact your gut too. And your gut is going to impact your brain, and your brain's going to impact what foods you choose, right? So we're always focusing in on that because it's not just me telling people what to eat, it's them understanding that what they do every day is going to impact what they're actually craving, right? If people are stressed out, they tend to crave higher sugar, higher fat, higher savory type meals. And so we're kind of always trying to calm that down to make sure they're choosing good nutritional foods and things that are healthy to feed their body the way that they need it. Vagal toning exercises. And a lot of people can't. It's funny. You tell people to meditate and do deep breathing, and a lot of people are like, yeah, okay, I know that. But a lot of people can't sit down and do that. And so I like giving them other ideas like
Mm.
gargling, gargle for 30 seconds when you brush your teeth in the morning, do it again at night. Do go hum and sing. If you commute to work, put your favorite song on and blast it in the car and sing your heart out, like everybody gets happy when they're singing. And so those are easier things to help them do. And then also like telling them to do things that they enjoy and love. Like I always joke with people that when my kids go to bed at night, like I love adult coloring books. I'll put my music on and I'll color in my adult coloring books. I like doing stuff like that, whether it's, and then other people like to journal, or other people like to do, there's so many things that can bring you joy, cuddling your animals. Those things tend to be, I think, more key than specific foods per se that I'm having people incorporate to support their adrenals, right? We know there's certain foods that are adaptogenic, mushrooms and things like that, and they can do that as much as they want, but it's always going to come down to, are you digesting and absorbing, and all the gut health as well. So that becomes a little bit tricky. So I always put a very strong focus on lifestyle as well.
I love that approach because I think sometimes we can go into a nutritionist office or maybe with a functional medicine practitioner and we complain about stress and high cortisol symptoms or adrenal fatigue symptoms. And we lead with ashwagandha and rhodiola and holy basil and nothing else except the, the pills. And it's really like that can, help if you're managing it from a lifestyle perspective, but, that's not going to save you. So I like that you're really addressing kind of the root cause there. And what
Yeah.
deficiencies are you seeing kind of across the board in really stressed out clients? Like I would assume magnesium and like B vitamins, but are there any trends that you're seeing?
I definitely B vitamins, definitely magnesium. I see more than often now zinc. Zinc tends to be one that's pretty depleted.
Mhm.
And antioxidants. Antioxidants tend to be really low in people with high stress too. So those are like the key ones I would say. And that's usually what I'm trying to support as well. Because again, when we look at stressors in the body and what's happening, we know, for healthy cellular function, we need healthy mitochondria, and those are nutrients for that. They're also nutrients for our liver to detox properly. So if we have stressors from, toxins coming into our system that our liver needs to push out. So I think all of those tend to be a bit more depleted, and those are usually the areas of focus. And you can get a lot of those from food, and a lot of them are crossover, right? With magnesium, B vitamins, chromium, those are blood sugar supportive, but even like omega-3 fatty acids, you can kind of create a perfect meal with all those, nutrients involved, because it's, nuts and seeds and legumes and leafy greens. And you can easily incorporate those into a meal and get all of them packed. And then you can kind of have supplements as like your crutch. I always tell people, so if you break your leg, you need a crutch to help you until you heal, right? And supplements are kind of like that. There's always some things you might want to hold on to a little bit longer term, but usually it's to help you in that time of need, why we're kind of adjusting your nutrition and your lifestyle.
And what are some of your favorite go-to meals?
Oh gosh, I'm like a huge fan of bowls, like any type of bowl diversity you can do. And I
Yes.
feel like because right? Like, and people think like they have to create this new recipe every time, right? They're like, well, I don't like to cook, or I don't like to meal prep. And how am I
Mm.
supposed to create a new meal all the time to get diversity? And so I tell them, like, bowls are perfect. You can alternate grains if you want to have grains, right? Quinoa, brown rice. You can put other starches like sweet potatoes. And you can literally just swap out one ingredient. So if you did quinoa one week, maybe you do sweet potatoes the next. And then if you had spinach and arugula, maybe you're doing kale the next week, right? So swapping out like one ingredient, and then even proteins. If you had salmon, then you can do chicken the next time, or utilize plant proteins and do like a chickpea mash. Like, there's ways to put so much diversity within one plate when you kind of do like a bowl, and you can, like I said, easily swap out one ingredient and have it be a completely different nutritional profile. And it's not making you spend hours in the kitchen.
I love that. I'm a huge, huge
Yeah.
fan of bowls myself. It's like the easiest way to get all your colors, all your textures, a good sauce. Like,
Yeah.
it's the best.
I have to say,
Yeah.
one of my recent favorites are burger bowls, which sounds, like it depends on
Ooh.
how you do it, right? Get
Mhm.
grass-fed beef. My boyfriend makes a great
Yeah.
coleslaw, and using avocado oil, or, using avocado oil-based mayo, sweet potato baked fries, and it's
Oh
so
yeah.
nice. You have your cabbage and your starch, your meat, and then pickles are essential for us. But yeah, I
Yes.
totally agree. You can take your favorite meal and just make it into a bowl pretty easily if you put some thought behind it.
Oh yeah,
Love that.
definitely. And they do have so
Oh,
many like sauces and
mhm.
things out there now that don't have like pro-inflammatory oils and all these different things. So you can literally spice up any bowl
Yeah.
with any type of flavor.
So true. Yeah. Yes. Options are endless. Um, okay. So we barely touched on sleep, Jessica. And actually, before we go to sleep, I want to touch on a little bit more about laboratory testing, as we were just speaking about deficiencies from a nutrient perspective. But what other trends are you seeing, maybe with stool testing or hormones, when you are looking at stress and prediabetes or insulin resistance?
Yeah.
Diabetes, of course.
So typically, I don't think I've ever had a stool test that's ever come back where I'm like, there's really nothing to fix there, right? And I always typically start there,
Mhm.
because we
Yeah.
know how interconnected the gut is to every organ in our system, right? And so if there's an imbalance there, there's probably an imbalance somewhere else. And I think a lot of people, even if they feel healthy, after they work with me or any other functional medicine practitioner, I think there's this aha moment where they're like, wow, I feel even better than I did. And that was just my normal and I didn't realize it. Right. So even if people don't have GI issues, I typically will always start and look there first, right? And you have the flexibility to choose certain testing, some that are more comprehensive and maybe some that aren't, just to get a baseline. But I typically can see secretory IgA tends to be a common one. That tends to usually be elevated when people have more stress going on in their system or inflammation. Zonulin is on certain testing. I know it's not necessarily like an intestinal permeability, like true tell, of that, but it can indicate to us if maybe there's some weakened lining, which that can indicate to us a stress response. And then digestion. Well, gosh, the whole stool test. I'm like going through, because then if you have, poor digestion, people, have low elastase or high steatocrit, those are key pivotal points, because if they're spending all this time and money on trying to eat foods that are fueling their system and they're not digesting or absorbing it well, you're creating a stress response on your system, because now your body's not getting those nutrients. And then you're not feeding the microbes in your body, right? Because it all goes downstream. And when we have microbial imbalances or dysbiosis, that's a stressor on our system. So the gut's typically a key place I look. And I mean, dysbiosis is pretty common, I would say, for digestion and probably high secretory IgA. Those are probably the three areas that I see usually that I can then correlate and see if I work on those. People tend to see some improvements along with working on nutrition and lifestyle within their insulin numbers, 100%. Now, if you hit a bit of a brick wall, or if people have the financial means that they want to explore more testing, I do like looking at nutritional profiles, right? Because you can see, are they without any supplementation? I typically do like to see people baseline without any supplementation, what their body is doing. So you can look at things like their B vitamins and their antioxidants and their detoxification pathways to see if that's a stressor on their system, right? So I typically will start there. I usually tell people I'm not going to look at your hormones yet, because we know you're stressed. You're telling me you're stressed. Or if you're not telling me you're stressed, your symptoms are expressing that you're stressed. And so if we don't work on things that are key first, like gut imbalances and nutrition and lifestyle, I can already kind of assume that maybe there's some adrenal issues or some hormone fluctuation. So I typically will kind of work on those, keystone aspects first, and then go to that later on if needed.
What about toxins? Are you seeing that? Maybe, as you said, if you're working on gut, you've improved digestion. Are you thinking about toxins and endocrine disruption in way of blood sugar?
Oh yeah, definitely. So one of the key things I try to help people do from the very beginning is, clean up their nutrition in a sense of buying more, organic, grass-fed, clean products, so they're not getting toxins from there, but also addressing like, you could go crazy, right? You could go through your whole house and start going through your cabinets where your cleaning products are and your perfumes and your makeup and all these different things. And I'll never forget, I listened to a podcast a long time ago, and I can't remember who was speaking on it, but they said the average, and this isn't female because females are probably worse than males, but the average male, by the time he, within 2 hours of waking up, has probably been exposed to already 40 different chemicals or toxins within what they're, drinking, their coffee, their deodorant, their shampoo, their shaving cream, all these different things, which just kind of blew my mind, because then you think of females and how much stuff we use. So the toxic burden is really high for people. So, but I think the biggest area that people don't realize is probably more like plasticizers, right? People drink out of plastic bottles all the time. And then they go, oh, well, I don't use, plastic containers at home to heat my food. But then if you get down to it, they eat out a lot and they're taking food to go. And those food places are probably putting hot food in plastic containers, right? So it's a lot of kind of digging and helping people uncover that they're probably getting exposures in ways they didn't even realize. And then I see a lot of women that are going through menopause, and when our hormones drop, we release more toxins into our system. And so that's a huge piece of the puzzle whenever we're looking at that, because even the menopausal group of women, we tend to have more blood sugar issues and more toxins, right? So it's definitely a piece of the puzzle, and trying to support, there's supplements, there's things you can do to support your antioxidants, and, glutathione, you can do IVs and things like that. But there's also just lifestyle, like getting exercise and movement, sweating, going to the sauna, doing infrared saunas. For that, people that like to do the rebounders or cold plunges. Like there's so many different things you can do now from a natural perspective just to support your detox pathway.
Totally, yeah. So, okay, so let's jump to sleep. Any tips or kind of, I guess, what is your opinion on, is it earlier to bed, earlier to wake, consistent sleep times, just shooting for 8 hours? Of course, everybody's gonna be a little bit different, but I watched a great podcast myself a while ago, and there was a lot of science thrown out about earlier to bed. And we had one practitioner say before 10 even. And then, and just studies showing that the health outcomes, if you're awake for 2 hours, on a regular basis between the hours of, I think it was 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., is that of a night shift worker. Mortality
Yeah.
spikes. And I just think that's fascinating. So I'm kind of curious, what kind of advice are you giving on sleep nowadays?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've read a lot of research on that too. And just even through my educational time frame in school, it's like, yeah, it's, I like to tell people 10 p.m. Like at least if you're not in bed, you should be like thinking about it and preparing for bed, right? Because I always try to
Better
go
get
back
ready.
to like, yeah. Well, and now you have things like your watches. My Aura ring will be like, get ready for bed. You get the little reminders and things like that, which is great. But most people just ignore them. But I always tell people, I'm like, think back to before people had electricity, right? We woke with the sun and we went to bed when the
Yes.
lights went out. Like people didn't have the ability to stay up all hours of the night because we didn't have that option. And that's how our bodies were built, right? They were built to kind of live off that cycle. And so I'm not saying like people have to go to bed at sunset, at 8 o'clock, but I usually say 10 p.m. seems to be the sweet spot, at least in the research that I've seen. And then, yeah, sleep is a fine line of also getting too little or too much, right? I think you should aim for 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And then it's not just the hours of sleep, but making sure you're actually getting that quality, right? So are you getting enough deep sleep? Are you getting enough REM to really allow your body to rejuvenate? Because if you don't have that quality, that's again, it goes back to stressor, and that stressor is going to cause, blood sugar issues. And we do see that on glucose monitors. We'll see people that just have high fasting glucose. And even if they didn't have a spike at dinner time, you're trying to assess, where's that coming from, right? Is it sleep apnea? Are you having cortisol surges at night? What's causing that to happen? So I think 10 p.m. seems to be the sweet spot, 7 to 8 hours if you can. And if you have something to track your sleep, even better, because again, like you want to make sure that quality is there. Because so many people will say they sleep 8 hours and they still feel like they're not rested when they wake up, right? So you're always wanting to address that.
And what are your thoughts on blue light? I'm sure that, works its way into the equation of staying up at night and messing with our circadian rhythm.
Yeah. I'm a huge advocate of telling people that an hour before bed, they should be really not having exposure to blue light. So I tell people, an hour before bed, go stretch on your yoga mat, listen to music, take a bath, take a shower, read a book, just get away from the screens. And it's so funny because I had a client the other day and she's like, yeah, sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I put the TV on and it's nothing that I'm going to pay attention to. I know that, but it helps me fall back asleep. And I'm like, I get that. When I was a teenager, I had to sleep with the TV on. Like I did. It helped me fall asleep. I don't know what it is. But now that I'm more educated on what it does, I'm still like, I get you. I understand you, but let's not do that. So there's a lot of different things we have at our fingertips now, again, to help people fall back asleep. Like one of the things I've been using lately is those binaural beats, right? You can get apps or just Google on YouTube and put that on. If you wake up in the middle of the night, they have like certain tones and beats at different hertz to actually help you fall back asleep. And if you create a good sleep hygiene schedule, right? Not talking about bills with your husband, but before you fall asleep, or checking emails, or getting away from your favorite Netflix, show you're surging, like your body will start to calm down. And again, there's some people that might need supplementation, and that's okay. But along with the lifestyle is what's going to be most impactful, right? Is like if someone, let's say, needs phosphatidylserine to calm their cortisol, you can give them that, but you want them to also be practicing those lifestyle factors.
That's a challenging one. Keeping the
Yeah.
screens away, during the evening. I'm so guilty of that too. I think what it is with like having something playing in the background while you're falling asleep is like it almost like tunes your mind out because it's so
Yeah.
mindless, like listening to a show you've seen a million times, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really good point. Knowing the science behind it, like we really shouldn't be doing that for our brains.
Well, and I tell people too, I'm like, if it is something like a show or even a podcast, like put it on your phone and turn the phone over. You can still listen to things as long
Right.
as it's not like a stimulant for you, as long as you're just not getting that like screen exposure. So they can still do that to an extent. It's just like doing it the right way.
Fair. Yeah. So, Jessica, as we wrap this up, I'd love to hear a case study, maybe one of your favorite case studies, wherein you used these lifestyle changes to really see a great outcome for one of your patients struggling with blood sugar and stress management.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, gosh, there's so many. I have this one patient, and she's probably one of the ones I've been working with the longest. She worked at a company that handled, it was like a biotech company, and she worked in the lab with a bunch of different like chemicals and things like that for 20 plus years.
Mm.
And so one of
Wow.
her biggest things she came to me for was actually weight loss. And she's in her 60s. And when I talk to people about weight loss, I tell them, I say the main things I'm looking at 100% is blood sugar, your GI health, your metabolic function, and your hormones, right? Those are the cascade of things, but blood sugar is always at the top of that. And then, so lo and behold, we did run some blood work. Her insulin, I think, was at like 23. And then her glucose, her A1C wasn't too high. I think it was like 5.7. That's manageable to me. Like it's higher than I want to see, but I know that like we're not way too far up in that range where it's going to be really hard to get it back down. So for her, I felt like a big piece of the puzzle was decreasing her toxicity level and like really making sure her detox pathways were working properly. And then also making sure we're cleaning up all the things in her life that are also contributing to those toxicities. So we worked on nutrition and we worked on making sure she's having those balanced meals, right? Making sure that her food timing, she's not going more than 4 hours between a meal. She's pairing properly with healthy proteins and fats. She's not over consuming higher glycemic type foods. We did the glucose monitor. We actually did, I think, 3 different rounds of the glucose monitor because she wanted to see, and I wanted to see kind of how these shifts and what we were doing were actually impacting her body. And then we just really supported her GI health and her detox pathways. So, and she was like such a great patient because you do have clients out there, and I'm sure we've all had them where you have worked so hard to try to get them to do certain things, and then they come back and check in with you and they've done maybe one of them, right? So she was one that really like dedicated and motivated herself to like actually take action with what we were doing. And so she got a rebounder. She was going to sauna therapy a couple times a week. She was getting out there and working. And then she was very into her faith. So like her faith was a big outlet for her as far as just like a stress management technique. But so far, and we did use intermittent fasting with her as well. She was a perfect candidate for something like that. She hated meal prepping. She really wasn't a breakfast type person. So we did utilize that as well. Because for fasting, if you hit a 36-hour fast, that's a sweet spot for toxin release from your adipose tissues. So we kind of worked up to where she was actually doing a 36-hour fast once a week for like 6 to 8 weeks to help her kind of decrease some of that toxic burden. And I think I just checked in with her, I want to say like 3 weeks ago, because we're not meeting as frequently anymore. She's doing so well. But she's lost 13 pounds so far. And so, and I think that's another piece of the puzzle you really need to express to people is like, you don't want to lose weight fast. It's supposed to be slow and steady and in a healthy way. So like I said, we've been working with each other for quite some time. I want to say, gosh, I'm trying to think back, at least 6 months. but it takes time to figure out like what the key players are, right? And then addressing those things. But over the course of her having little hiccups and vacations and things pop up and then getting back on track with our recommendations, she's lost about 13 pounds and her blood sugar looks better.
Hey,
Awesome.
that's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
I love that there's so many like interventions and, you know, things that play into it when you're looking at someone's blood sugar, and it's not just blood sugar balancing meals. It's so much more than that. And there's so many different tools that you can use depending on what the person's situation is. And I'm really glad we had this conversation today on the podcast, because we've talked about balancing blood sugar before, but we've never talked about the intricate link that it has with our stress hormones and just all the lifestyle factors that kind of weave into it as well. So
Yeah.
thank you, Jessica, so much for sharing all this knowledge with us today. And where can our listeners find you online if we want to learn more about you or connect with some of your content?
Yeah. So if anyone goes to naturalandnourish.com, that's my website, and you can sign up to either communicate with me through email. I do calls with people virtually. And then if anybody's local in San Diego, I do in a clinic here as well.
Emmie is down in San Diego, actually. I'm so
am.
jealous of you guys. I love it over there.
Yeah,
It's a
it's
great place to
beautiful.
be.
Yeah.
But we'll be sure to link the website down in the show notes for you guys tuning in, just so you can find and connect with Jessica. And again, thank you so much, Jessica, for taking the time today to do this interview. I'm so happy that we had this conversation, and I know it's going to serve our audience well. And until next week, I'm wishing us all vibrant health and wellness.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guest and host are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.